Hi, and welcome to this course on how to use 3D Studio Max 2013. 3ds Max, as it's known, is one of the industry standard 3D applications for creating content for a wide variety of different media. For example, video games, illustration, advertising, motion graphics, medical. I mean, you name it, you can do it inside of Max. It's that well known and is probably one of the most used 3D applications on the planet. So I want to gently guide you through how to use this application. Later on, we'll get a little bit more in depth when we start talking about how we can take our 3D Studio Max files and work with other applications, for example, Photoshop. I'm also going to talk about how you can incorporate digital media like the iPad and Styli like the Jot Touch, the Poco Connect, and other tools to really help create sketches and that kind of stuff as well. We're going to talk about a lot of the new features, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. But by the time we're done, let me go ahead and show you very quickly what our final result's going to be. We're going to create this little scene here. We're going to create a very basic cabin shape. All right, and this project will be called the Ogre Cabin later on in the course. And using what looks like pretty much the most basic shapes in the world, we're going to talk about how we can create textures in several different ways. So let me go ahead and just scroll through here. We're going to talk about how to paint our textures manually. So just in case you want to have a very unique feeling to your textures and not have to rely on images, we'll talk about techniques you can use to paint them. We're also going to talk about what a mood board is so that you can gather your ideas and your thoughts about what your scene should entail. For example, the feeling of it, the colors, the materials you might want to incorporate, like brick and moss and wood and that kind of stuff. We'll talk about how we can export what's known as a UV snapshot out of Max as well. And this is simply a little bounding box around the different parts of your model that you can then paint on so that when you put your images in Max, they're stuck to where they're supposed to go. So we're going to touch on UV maps very briefly. And by the time we're done, we'll also be able to do some really cool filters like this in Photoshop. So you can have like a nice woodcut and you can make a nice postcard. So let me go ahead and actually open this model so you can see what the model's going to look like here that we're going to build. All right, nothing too fancy, just something to get you started, to get your feet wet. But as you saw in those pictures, we're going to be able to take this basic shape here and turn it into something kind of cool. Many of the 3D models that you see in movies and in games start out just like this. Pretty boring. But it's the texture artist and it's the lighting and all that stuff that goes behind the scenes to take this basic shape and turn it into something spectacular. Now, as far as some of the tools we're going to talk about, well, we'll talk about the basic interface, like the viewports, the ability to create things with our command panel and to modify those things. We'll talk about how we can render our scenes out, how we can do some basic animations. We'll also talk about some of the new features, like the amazing Slate compositing editor and the render path system called State Sets, which I really like. We'll talk about the interoperability with 3D Studio Max with some Adobe applications like Photoshop. Just really a bunch of great stuff. And something like tab layouts, which live over here. So you can change how you're looking at your file very, very quickly and very easily. So let's go ahead and get started and dive into learning Autodesk 3D Studio Max 2013.